It's time for Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree, featuring Chicagoland's brightest jazz stars. And now, your host, Barry Winograd.
Hello, and welcome to another musical adventure on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. I'm your host, Barry Winograd. We're proud to be able to present some of Chicago's finest musicians from the world of jazz as they bring to us their playing and talking about that unique art form, jazz. Summer's arrived, and Uncle Izzy was at his estate enjoying the 4th of July festivities and conversing about the history of our young country, when we both realized that jazz, also a young country, has a wonderful oral tradition that's brought to us by many wonderful performers, including our own John Weber.
The old left-hand crossover. Let's try this key. Try that on a Steinway. There's a song called Little Bit Independent, written by two guys named Edgar Leslie and Joe Burke. Nobody names their kid Edgar anymore. And that was actually recorded by Fats Waller, about 1935, famous stride piano player. And Nat Cole did a recording of that about 1955 or so. And the reason I played that song in particular is because it is Independence Day. It is July 4th, a little bit independent. And I got another song I'm gonna play from 18, dig this, maybe 1880. There's a guy named F.W. Meacham, for whom Meacham Road may or may not have been named. And he was a big influence on John Philip Sousa, a big 4th of July kind of a guy. And he wrote a song called American Patrol. Maybe you'll recognize this one because Glenn Miller did it, I think, 1942 or so. That was called American Patrol, not to be confused with Rat Patrol, which I'm not old enough to remember. That was a television show that was on about 3 in the morning. And maybe Barry's old enough to remember when it was on in prime time. I'm not sure. Let's see, what else can we play about America? How about, actually, let's play a song called America. How's that sound? I think this is one that Oscar Peterson should have recorded on his West Side Story album. And it's written by Leonard Bernstein. Bernstein? Which is it? Now you say pajamas and I say pajamas, and let's play the tune already. Let's see. The old tricky left hand thing. Actually, I think there should be a 15-yard penalty for using the left-hand crossover thing twice in one session. But we're going to ignore that for now because I think it's automatic league expulsion if I do it 3 times, so stop me if I do. Any case, I'm going to play a tune by a great American composer named Edward Kennedy Ellington, also known as Duke Ellington, who in 1999 will be celebrating his centennial. After all, he was born on April 29th of 1899, same day as my mother. Well, I mean, not the same year, but the same day as my mother, April 29th. And we're going to play a song initially titled Dreamy Blues, which Mitchell Parrish added lyrics for 1931, and they rechristened it Mood Indigo.
This is Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. I'm Barry Winograd, and we're enjoying the musicality of pianist John Weber. He's brought us a little bit independent, American Patrol, America, and Duke Ellington's classic Mood Indigo. John will be back with us in a moment, right here on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. And welcome back to Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. I'm your host, Barry Winograd, and today we're joined by pianist John Weber. John's a musician who moved down here from Milwaukee back in 1987, and you've been playing piano since the age of 3. Is that right, John?
That's correct.
And am I to understand that you've never had any formal piano lessons?
That is true. I never had any lessons in my life. I have no ruler marks on my knuckles. I've been spared.
So you're actually practicing the jazz tradition in its true original way, the oral tradition of passing on sounds from one musician to the next, from one generation to the next.
That's absolutely true. We had a bunch of piano rolls. We were lucky enough to have a player piano from Grandma with a zillion songs in it, and I would play them back, and I'd try to play it different every single time, differently.
Wow, that is fantastic. It's amazing that you've come up with the great talent that you have on your own.
Thanks.
Most people would get started and then find a teacher, but not John Weber. And I'm honored to say that your fingers move wonderfully.
Thanks,
Yes.
and thanks for having me on the show, too.
Oh, yeah, well, we're very glad to have you here on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree and give us a chance to showcase some of the great Chicago talent like yourself. And a lot of people don't know that Chicago is more than Al Capone. It's more than Michael Jordan. I always got a kick out of people saying, yeah, Michael Jordan's changed the image of Chicago. Well, what about all the great musicians who took the music from Chicago? Nat King Cole, Benny Goodman, and many others, and are appreciated worldwide for their great musicianship. And you too, John, you do a lot of traveling, don't you?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I just came back from Germany. Actually, I was just on holiday there. But I do go to, I just also did a tour earlier this year in Australia and New Zealand, where I'm going to be returning in November. I like it down there. It's nice and warm.
And you go to Iceland a lot, isn't that true?
I've been there 8 times.
And didn't you tell me you're a very popular artist in New York and was it the 92 stage? Is that what
The 92nd Street Y is
90.
this wonderful place. Dick Hyman does a jazz series there about 2 or 3 times a year, and I've done about half a dozen of those shows. It's a lot of fun.
And by doing all this, you're another great representative of Chicago and the Chicago music scene, which is so, I think, very hot and heavy and loaded with talented people like yourself. And spreading the joy of Chicago music, and yet you always come back home to Chicago, which I think is great.
I like it in Chicago.
Yeah. And Chicago musicians put out a lot of recordings too, and we've got 3 of yours. Of how many CDs have you put out so far now?
3 have been released, although this one right here, Jazz Connoisseur is the label. It's a Swiss label. I recorded 3 albums in 3 days, and they're going to release one in '99 and then release one the following year. But this was a live performance that I did there actually at a place called Art Alte Kirche in Baswil, Switzerland.
And do you find on each CD, do you have a particular focus of songs, or do you, like your latest one, Livingston and Evans, where you used a lot of their songs, and yet you also are a man who I know loves, and like me, we grew up as a TV generation, and you heard a lot of songs, like the I Love Lucy theme seems to pop up a lot in your life, and I think you're going to do a TV theme for us a little later in Mr. Lucky. Do you find that those just sort of pop into your head when you're playing, or are they sort of an integral part of your repertoire?
Well, they pop in your head because you've been hearing them all your life. Somebody once mentioned to me that if you were born after World War II, you will, chances are, watch on the average 15 years of television before you die. And I guess a year and a half of that's commercials. So you're taking the music from all these sources, movies, television, everywhere. And you just sneak in little spare parts, as Teddy Wilson used to call them, of songs, which somebody, even if they're not a musician, might recognize a little quote of Yankee Doodle in the middle of the song where it doesn't have any business being.
Yeah, well, that's something that makes jazz and music a lot more familiar and comfortable for people. And we all get a little kick out of it, too, to see how an artist such as yourself can mold and weave different parts of music, and whether it's classical music or TV themes, they all have some sort of true good feeling and meaning to people, and keeps their attention. Well, John, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of this set, and I want to thank you again for joining us on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. A little later on, we will give John's email addresses, and you can check him out there and find out where he's playing. And if you're traveling around the world, maybe you can run into John Weber as well. So here he is again, John Weber, on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree.
I've been playing a bunch of songs from the first half of the 20th century, when most of American popular music came from theater and jazz standards. But for the last 40 years or so, that's been a different story because a lot of film music and rock and roll and television music actually has become a big part of our consciousness, our American musical conscious experience. And I'm going to play a song written in 1959 by Henry Mancini and Jay Livingston and Ray Evans, a tune from a television show called Mr. Lucky. That was called Mr. Lucky, written by Henry Mancini and Jay Livingston and Ray Evans. Should I mention that Henry Mancini was born on the 16th of April of 1924 and that Ray Evans was born on February 4th of 1915 near Buffalo, New York, and Jay Livingston was born on the 28th of March of 1915. And I guess only Uncle Izzy's the only other guy in America who knows that besides the principals involved. And what should we play next? I know what I'm going to play. A tune written by Jay Livingston and Ray Evans from 1948, which mentions 4th of July, or it's my July 4th, it actually says. A song called Cincinnati. There aren't anywhere near enough songs about Cincinnati with the 513 area code, so I'm going to play the my favorite one. 15-yard penalty for the same quote twice in one session. That was sort of the Chattanooga choo-choo coda, wasn't it? Sort of. Leaves the Pennsylvania station about 3:45 and read a magazine, and you're in Baltimore. Dinner in the diner, nothing could be finer than to have your ham and eggs in Carolina. Next, I'm going to play a song by Sammy Cahn and Julie Stein. And Julie Stein was born on New Year's Eve, 1905 in London. He moved to Chicago, where I live, about 8 months later. And later on from that, met Sammy Cahn, who was born on June 18th of 1913. And they did a song called September of My Years, which was a big album later in Frank Sinatra's career, about 1964. And it goes like this.
This is Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree. I'm Barry Winograd, and we want to thank John Weber for joining us today. The songs we've heard, they've been A Little Bit Independent, American Patrol, America, Mood Indigo, Mr. Lucky, Cincinnati, and September of My Years. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Barry Winograd saying support live jazz, and we'll see you next time right here on Uncle Izzy's Jazz Jamboree.